This video is about the 7 churches seen right here that are found in Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3. Now, some believe that the events described in Revelation are events that have already transpired or taken place. Others believe that the book of Revelation, at least largely, are events still yet to come. I actually believe that both views are true simultaneously. So right now, as we kind of look upwards, as we're here stuck in traffic, this is the AT&T building. This is actually the building that van parked aside and had that countdown, and then an explosion went off and blew the van or the camper up. This AT&T building in the heart of Nashville, it's often compared to the Eye of Sauron. You can see the two antenna looking structures that go up, and then in the middle where it says AT&T, it's got the eye in the center.
If you can hear this message, evacuate now. If you can hear this message, evacuate now.
So that was footage of the car bombing that occurred on December 25th of 2020 in the heart of Nashville, Tennessee. And on that note, there are many who believe that the United States is just way too far gone to ever come back. How could the Lord possibly, we're like Sodom and Gomorrah, how could the Lord possibly save us? I actually very strongly disagree with that. And also right next to the building, kind of interestingly enough, you have the Apple store with the bit Apple. The first Apple computers were, I believe they were $666.66 or something like this. And the apple, if I understand properly, is to represent Adam and Eve biting the apple in the garden. The total symbolism of the start of that company. In this video, I'm going to be laying forth to you that the world has always been a dangerous place, but more than that, I'm going to lay into your hands some possibilities using Revelation 2, chapter 2 and chapter 3, of where we would actually be at right now, where we could possibly be at right now in biblical prophecy. And I think it might be more encouraging than many of you think. And really the history actually of the foundation of the United States, from the Revolutionary War during the time of George Washington, climaxing during the time of Andrew Jackson. And right now what we're jammed in the traffic of, this is downtown Nashville. The heart of country music is where we're at. And we're going to be looking at the foundation of the United States of America. This that I have on the screen behind me, these are the 7 churches that are found in Revelation 2 and 3 that Yohn or John was told to write letters to. Now, these were not just literal churches that existed at that time, they were, but they're commonly taught to represent church ages. In fact, if they were in any other order than what I'm about to share with you, would not be true. Now, each one of these letters has 7 elements, or 7 possible elements. In fact, you couldn't count up the number of 7s in the book of Revelation. These churches in this order, in the order found in Revelation, are this. Ephesus, that's the apostolic church. This is a church coming directly after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Smyrna, this is going to be the martyr church where Christians are being killed left, right, and center. Pergamos, this is the compromising church. So the martyr church is going to have some serpents slip inside of it. Then number 4 is going to be the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I'd like to point out to you that inherent to the letters themselves, there's a difference between the first 3 and the last 4. Here's what that difference is. All of these last 4 will be present at the end. The letters are specific to this. They're telling you that these last 4 are going to be present in the end times. That would be the Roman Catholic Church. Sardis represents the Reformation Church. Philadelphia, that's an important one right there. Philadelphia is the missionary church, and Laodicea, this is the richy rich, the worldly church. Now here's just a few things as we get a pinch further into this video that might make you feel like, We're already living in the pages of Revelation or close, or certainly headed towards perhaps a dystopian future. On the screen behind me, this is Amazon's contactless payments. It reads your palm. You can buy concert tickets with it, or you can verify your identity with it. Right now, if you lived in China, there's cameras all over the place. They all do facial recognition, and they determine where you're allowed to go and where you're not allowed to go, which brings us directly into 15-minute smart cities, where perhaps you won't even need a car or need to travel. You know, at the time of the pharaohs, they could have only dreamed of having the technology we have today. I mean, from Pharaoh's view, if you're not pushing rocks to build the pyramid, then why are we feeding you for the day? Now, all of these technological advances currently have warm, fuzzy explanations behind them. For example, the 15-minute cities. You're just trying to reduce your carbon imprint and trying to do your part to fight climate change. Here behind me on the screen is the mother of all 15-minute cities. This is what Saudi Arabia calls the line. You will literally be living inside of a wall that goes on for roughly 100 miles or 175 kilometers. It's the height of a skyscraper, a many-story tall building, and people live inside the wall, and there are train tracks, high-speed train tracks that go back and forth within the wall. You'll have no need to travel anywhere. I can't see any way that would turn out poorly. How about pestilence and plague? Well, we've just made it through the COVID-19 experience, and we're being assured that there's much more to come. Now, one of the things that I pointed out quite a while back is that the word corona means crown. Corona means crown. Somebody's after your crown. Corona means crown. Corona is comprised of 6 letters. If we take the math of each one of these letters on the screen behind me, the C, for example, equaling 3. Well, if we go down, so corona has 6 letters. If we add up all of the math of those letters, it would be 66. 666. Now let's take that just a pinch further. If I come over here and I take my coronavirus number of 666, and during the 2020 election, if you wanted to vote for Biden and Harris, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you would have texted your vote to 30330. What an unusual number there. A lot of threes in that.
If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
Well, that election was in 2020 during the coronavirus. So if I take the number 2020 and I divide it by our coronavirus number of 666, well, what a coincidence. I come up with 3.0330. If I wanted to vote Biden and Harris, I would text my vote to 30330. I don't think I have to point out the significance, the esoteric significance of the 33. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. During the coronavirus, we all need to be very, very safe. Make sure you stay, 6 feet apart? I'd like to point out that it is God, not men, who decide when we hit the end times, even if men try to help push it along. I'd like to come up from the worldly church, or Laodicea. Speaking of sixes, I'd like to come to this 6th church here, this church of Philadelphia. Now, I'd like to tie that into the city of Philadelphia here in the United States. Prophecy is not just prediction and fulfillment. Prophecy is also pattern. In other words, what happened in the past can give us a real big clue to what's going to happen in the future. Now, Philadelphia, well, that's where many of your founding documents of this United States were signed. The Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia on July 4th of 1776. This unusual city of Philadelphia right here. And by the way, if that's where we be, right here, if that's where we be in biblical prophecy, then we are living in some of the most exciting times in all of world history. But before we get to Philadelphia, I'd like to come up this list. We have Ephesus. Now, this is the apostolic church, which comes right after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But then number 2 is Smyrna, the martyr church. And in Smyrna, beginning in verse 8, so this would be Revelation chapter 2, verse 8. 8 is a number of new beginnings. To the angel of the church of Smyrna write, these are the words of him who is first and last, who died and came to life again. Verse 9, I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. In these letters, they all have 7 possible elements. So they begin with a title and an address. But then they're going to, like an employer or a boss, they're going to usually tell you what you did well, what you did not so well. But in this particular church, and also the churches that believed that they were doing really, really well were actually doing really, really poorly. Like Laodicea, you think you're rich, but you're actually poor, blind, and naked. With Smyrna, they thought they were doing really, really poorly. They're getting slaughtered left, right, and center. But the text is stating here, so it's the reverse of the way it looks with the eyes. That actually becomes important. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but they are of the synagogue of Satan. What does that mean? I bet that term will become important. But let's go on. I'd like to look at some symbols that follow us through this. Symbols in the words. Victor's crown, second death. We're going to start up here in verse 10. 10 is a yod. A yod dangles like a thought, an idea, the Spirit of God dangling just between the gateway, between heaven and earth. The number 10, number of completion. Do not be afraid of what you're about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you'll be persecuted for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Now, when I read that passage, I'm brought to think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When even the king came and the king was saying, just bow down, guys. The king did not want them thrown into the fire. But Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they told the king, they said, we cannot bow. And beyond this, our Lord will save us. But even if he does not, we will not bow. What a powerful statement. And when they were put in the fire, it was seen that there were the 3 of them, and then another figure appeared. The same figure that's in this passage. And I will give you life as your victor's crown. The men who had them thrown in that fire would be thrown in the fire themselves. Verse 11, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt by the second death. Now, I'd like to take a look at some Hebrew symbols, and I'd also like to hit pause on these 2 phrasings, the victor's crown and the second death, and also this concept of the synagogue of Satan, who likes Jewish symbols as well. These are Hebrew symbols that I have behind me on the screen that I had made for God in a Nutshell many years ago at this point. In Hebrew, we read from right to left, and there are 22 letters or 22 symbols in the Hebrew language. There are 2 of these symbols that I'm going to focus on. So we start with the Aleph, that's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and we're going to come down, coming from right to left, we're coming down. We're going to come to the second line here, and I'd like to take a look at this one here that looks like speaking of a victor's crown, this symbol here that looks a little like a crown. The symbol is called the Shin. It is the number 300. It's the 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It represents the teeth, the consuming fire. It also has an appearance of a crown. Like in our passage before, we were talking about a victor's crown. This is that same symbol right here, the number 300, the 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That's the Shin right there in its ancient form. Now I want to come to the very last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. This symbol right here, this symbol is called the Tav. This right here, this is a larger version of the symbol of the Tav. You're going to notice immediately that it makes a cross. It means sign or mark. Now if I hop from ancient Hebrew, that's what this is. There it is right there in ancient Hebrew. And I hop over to modern Hebrew. That cross, that last letter, becomes this symbol right here. It becomes a doorway, a gateway. And this symbol inside of it, that little dot right there, that's actually what's called a yod. It's this little guy right here. It's the 10th letter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 is the number of completion. A yod is a letter that dangles. It dangles like a little thought, an idea, the Spirit of God. Just a little yod dangling as if through the doorway, the gateway, to reach in from heaven to reach into earth. A little yod right there. So in short, what I'm telling you is that your cross, which follows your crown, your fire of God, your consuming teeth, your crown, that cross right there, that sign or mark, that tov, when you go from your ancient form seen on the screen right there and you hop to your modern form, it becomes a doorway, a gateway, within which dwells the Spirit of God Himself. Perhaps the doorway through which one evades the second death. And here's Smyrna again. This represents the martyr church. It's the second church on the list. And I, the same I that was on that cross, will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious, somebody's trying to steal a crown, will not be hurt at all by the second death. Now the next one down on this list is going to be the third one, the infamous Pergamos. This is the compromised church. Now there's a difference on these churches between the first three and the last four. The last four will all be there during the end times. Those would be the Thyatira, the Roman Catholic Church, Sardis, the Reformation Church, Philadelphia, that's the one I'm going to be arguing that you're in right now, the missionary church, and Laodicea, the worldly church. You're in a muddle of the two. Pergamos is the third one. Here I've got Pergamos and I've got Thyatira. These two kind of go together. Pergamos is well known for the infamous line. It's where we get the statement, the place of the seat of Satan. It's from Pergamos, known for its idols. So the worship of the Lord with the worship of idols is actually what that picture of Pergamos is. But it goes deeper than that. This is just simply what it says. And to the angel of the church of Pergamos write, these are the words of he who has the sharp two-edged sword. It should be noted that the language has kicked up a notch. It has intensified. These are the words of him who has the sharp double-edged sword. Passage verse 13, I know where you live, where Satan has his throne. Up here on the top, I have this would be the throne of Zeus, which was located in Pergamos. Pergamos is in modern day Turkey. There are a lot of people that have connected Pergamos with Geneva, Switzerland. I'm not sure entirely where they're getting that from, but I find it interesting. Actually, there are far more fascinating things about that. Zeus, of course, was the father of Apollo, which is a play on words, a Greek play on words of Apollyon, or Abaddon, the destroyer, is what it's stating there. Zeus was the father of Apollo, and of course you have the bottomless pit, which will be opened with these strange demon locusts that come forth. But the city of Pergamos is actually in modern day Turkey. It's not in Geneva, Switzerland. But it was in Pergamos where this throne was. Yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, not even the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. Text goes out of its way to tell you this twice about this altar and throne that is up here. Now, what were they doing? Well, the text is going to tell us this. This church has a heavy criticism given to it. Verse 14, nevertheless, I have a few things against you. And they're the same things, by the way, that the Lord always got on to Israel about. Choose this day who you serve. And if you mingle the text, if you take the Babylonian text, if you try to serve idols and God, you've already made your choice. There are some amongst you who hold to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols, and to Baal or Baal, or their Baal worshippers this very day, going all the way back to the Canaanites. These spirits have always been with you, who sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality. Now, this particular throne or altar to Zeus, Adolf Hitler himself had a recreation of this altar to Zeus made for Nazism. And the Church of Pergamus, had an altar in it called, this is a model here of the Great Altar. It's currently located in Berlin. It was moved to Berlin, and it also looks an awful lot like, it looks a lot like the staging that was built for the Democrat National Convention for Barack Obama. This that I've got represented on the screen behind me, this is quite literally your ages of world history. They begin with the Assyrians. There's 6 of them. Some would argue that right now you're in what might be called Rome Phase 2. You have 6 major ages of history. They begin with the Assyrians, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. Each one of these would build upon each other. The Assyrians would really encompass both the Sumerian and the Akkadians. That would be the time period of Nimrod. Now, and these all come after the flood. Nimrod would have quite literally been your first Mason, your first Freemason, perhaps. When you come down to the Romans, Rome is the only one of these empires that was never conquered. It was never conquered. It collapsed under the weight of its own bureaucracy. All of these empires, at the point of the Romans, at the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, they would transform into religions. Accordingly, these churches right here, in the way that I'm interpreting them to you in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, are giving you a kind of a roadmap of that time frame before the heavy stuff in the book of Revelation begins, is what I'm submitting to your hands. Now, in this layout of 6 ages of empires, it's going to be in the final 2, the Greeks and the Romans. We're going to see the emergence of orders, which you might today call secrety societies or little witchy clubhouses, backroom, private, secret societies. You'll see the inception of them popping up sort of during the time of the Persians, but really blossoming during the time of the Greeks and the Romans. During the time of the Greeks and the Romans, you had come forth what you today call democracy. A better term for it would probably be bureaucracy, is what you had emerged during those 2 empires. In short, what you really had come forth was, well, the ability for you to have lots of aristocrats running loose, which necessitated there being a difference between the common man who you're trying to control in some ways and tax, and the elites of that hour. Here I've put on the screen a separating line between the first 3 and the last 4. Now, the first, Ephesus, this is directly following the time of Jesus. This would include the time period of the disciples of Jesus Christ, Ephesus. And then Smyrna is the martyr church. So during the time of the Romans, they were lighting Christians on fire. They were feeding them to lions. They were putting them in the gladiator cages for entertainment. And the more that they did this, the more Christians that they slaughtered, the more Christianity expanded. More than this, the Caesars, what they began to notice was that, the Christians are unwilling to bow to you as a god, but they do pay their taxes. They do all of these other moral rules they'll do, and they really don't cause you any trouble for your empire, whereas the pagans are happy to come and fall down and tell you you're a god all day long, but they've got their hands out and they want free stuff. So what happened was, during the time of the Romans, for whatever cause that you particularly want to ascribe to it, they decided to make Christianity the state religion of Rome, is what they decided to do. And in doing that, what they did was all of the pagan stuff didn't actually go anywhere. It just got covered with the Christian beliefs. In other words, the pagan stuff, they're trying to make everybody happy. You took the pagan stuff and the Christian stuff, you mingle it together and you get Christianese. So what you had actually happen on this timeline up here is under Smyrna, you've got the Christians are just hanging on by a thread. The Lord is stating, just hang in there, man. Just make it. Just make it. And even if you don't, I've got you. Under Pergamos, we're beginning to loosen up a little bit. And we're beginning to intermingle the idols with the Christianity. Under Thyatira is where we're actually going to take the pagan religions, the Baal worship and all of it, and we're going to take the Christianity, we're going to mix them together, and we're going to make Christianity, or a version of Christianity, the state religion, and that version is going to be called the Roman Catholic Church. But it actually is a church, and it's listed on this list. It's the first one of the last four that will be there at the end times. It's also the one for which you begin to have the most need for there to be secret clubhouses above, because the pagan beliefs that were causing Baal worshipers to throw Christians to lions, those beliefs did not go anywhere. But they now get put a little bit behind a curtain because the common man's belief that has spread is Christianity during the time of the Romans. So what the common people believed is going to often be quite different from what the people behind the curtain believe is what's occurred. Okay, here's what Thyatira reads, and don't eat me alive. I've got family members that are Catholic, and I love them to death, but here's simply what the letter reads. It is a church. It is the first one of the last four. All right, this would be Revelation chapter 2, beginning in verse 18. To the angel of the church of Thyatira write. These are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like that of blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. We've gone from a little angry to these words sound very intense. I know your deeds and your love and faith and your service and perseverance. There is no church that is more giving to the poor over time. Well, that's a toss-up. But the Catholic Church is known for being there for the needy and helping the poor. I know your deeds, your love and your faith, your service and your perseverance, and that you are even doing more now than you did at the first, is what it's stating. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of foods sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent of her immorality, but she is unwilling. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely, unless they repent of her ways. I will repay each of you according to your deeds. You do not want to be repaid according to your deeds. 24, that's a number of high authority. These are some of the redeeming sections of this text. Note each word carefully. Now I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teachings and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden upon you except that you hold on to what you have until I come. These are bold words. Here's, of course, the Catholic Church's Vatican Audience Hall. It's shaped like an enormous serpent head. They have very sketchy answers for this, and more than just the shape of the auditorium being that of a serpent. By the way, serpent worship is the oldest form of worship on the planet. It goes all the way back to the Nakash, which means shining one, in the garden is where it goes back to. But it's not just sketchy answers for why we've got an auditorium shaped like a serpent, but in the heart of that auditorium, we have this thing here, this reptilian-looking thing here that it's said to be an image of Jesus coming forth. And what I'm using is a pointer for these sections. This is a little replica of an idol from ancient Sumer, Akkad, surrounded by, in the same areas where you find all these little eye idols and eye temples that we go over in our Genesis series. This thing would be called the Tiamat, or out of the Enuma Elish, or the ancient Namu, serpent god. A lot of connection between demons and serpents and snakes and reptile-looking things. This character here coming out the back of this display, which would be quite literally at the back of the serpent's mouth inside that auditorium. Well, this figure here, the first time I ever saw it, reminded me of old Sumerian Akkadian imagery of the Enki. You have Enki and you have Enlil. They play good cop, bad cop. Enlil is always yelling that the world is overpopulated. It's too crowded up in here. We got to do some sacrifice. Enki is seen here in this display. He's coming. This is literally a doorway into another realm that Enki is stepping out from. Even the devil himself comes as an angel of light. He's surrounded by these wavy lines. These are the celestial waters on his side, or his little accompaniments, or his bodyguards, if you will. And another famous Enki seal. We find similar imagery on this seal right here. This is what we've got on this seal. This is the Enki. He's stepping on out of another realm. These are quite literally celestial waters right here. The Abzu, he's stepping out of another dimension. That's as simple as it is. They're drawing it out for you. These are even little fishes that he's got going through. He is coming out of the Abzu, or the celestial waters. He's wearing on top of his head his little witch's hat. He's accompanied by, he's being guided by his raven, his falcon, his crow. At his side over here, we have Inanna. This is going to be the precursor of the Jezebel that's being talked about in that passage. This is going to be Inanna, or you could call her Semramses. She's got 6 little bow and arrows in her back. I want you to notice the wings on Inanna. Our Genesis series is a great study that walks through all of these things. These are quite literally some of the seals that go all the way back, just like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the very beginning of our written history. This is what they were stating. And I've been breaking it down in the best ways that I can for you to look at. I believe that you have the right to look at this stuff. Here, down here, this is Utu. This is going to be the first sun god of Earth. And he's coming forth. He's literally being guided by the Enki. That's what this display on the back screen is, which looks strikingly similar to the imagery we have here in this snake-shaped, this serpent-shaped audience hall. The Dark Ages were the time that came after the Romans. The Dark Ages were predominantly the time period ruled by the Catholic Church. You had really 2 things that prominently stick out that were science developments, if you were, during that time. They would have been incredibly well done Mason work all over the place, particularly in Europe, and also torture devices. Some of the most ingenious torture devices. I mean, they would slowly drill your eyes out over days, lock you in an Iron Maiden. These were literally the advances that were happening during the time of the Dark Ages. I think a lot of the secrets in the secrety clubhouses come from a lot of things that came from exactly those time frames. I repeat again, beginning in verse 24, "Now I say the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teachings and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden on you except that you hold on to what you have until I come. To the one who is victorious, each one has a commendation or blessing at the end, including Thyatira, if you are to succeed. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. That one will rule them with an iron scepter." But then we're going to have beneath Thyatira, here at Sardis, you're going to have a reformation that occurs. It wasn't perfect, but a reformation, a coming out of some really dark times in the history of our world, for whatever reasons you want to attribute to them, and there are lots. But then we're going to make it to number 6. Number 6 is the number of man. Number 6 is the place, the missionary church. One of the churches that nothing bad was said against it. Nothing bad was said against it. High blessings were put on it. More directly, perhaps the first time in the history of these, and the history of all of these, which were pretty well dark hours for most all common men, right here, we have ourselves an unusual letter to the Church of Philadelphia. This brings us full circle to where we first began. to this fledgling nation where people were willing to lay down their very lives on the highest altars of sacrifice for something that had never existed before in all the ages of men, something called freedom. But they also, in all of their imperfections, they dedicated this land to the Lord. And it was, in fact, in a city called Philadelphia on July 4th of 1776, where the Declaration of Independence would be signed. Now, your first president was George Washington, depicted in this famous image here of Washington crossing the Delaware. This was on December 25th and 26th of 1776, just briefly after, in the same year, that those documents, those precious documents, were signed. This would be the first surprise attack organized by George Washington. He lost many, many, many battles. George Washington did. But he would just keep getting up and dusting off and going forward again. And he would tell the men out there, he would tell them that if they don't succeed, then there's no reason to live anyway, is what Washington would tell his men. This military campaign was organized in great secrecy. Do you believe you're in hours of history where there may be things going on in great secrecy? There's a lot of correlation between George Washington and the start of this nation and the hours you're in now, just in my view. Organized in great secrecy by Washington in what was one of the Revolutionary War's most logistically challenging and dangerous operations. Now, I'd like to take you to this letter, to this church of Philadelphia, this missionary church. This would be in Revelation chapter 3, beginning in verse 7. It's a good number. I'm just going to read to you what it states. To the angel of the church of Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the keys of David. What he opens, no man can shut, and what he shuts, no man can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no man can shut. Now, speaking of sevens in the book of Revelation, there came a point following all of this where all hope, even for Washington, this is a famous painting of him praying at Valley Forge, but all hope looked lost by any human means. The British had taken Philadelphia in September of 1777. Oh, they had taken the heart of Philadelphia. They were back there, they were partying with the women, saying, give me another glass. They were about to crush this little continental army by this man, this new little fledgling empire. They were going to crush it out. You are going to be taken by the old empire in its clutches again. But George Washington is recorded at Valley Forge. He would go out and he would pray. And he was losing men to the snow and to the elements. And there was famine, there was shortage of food. Do you feel like you're in hours where you might be headed towards a famine, where it might be cold and dark for a minute? And men that knew, even rebellious men in this land, they know who the name of Jesus is. And in those cold, dark hours, even the men who are shivering and they're in the snow and they might not live another day, but they knew who the name of the Lord was, and so did this man who was their leader. Their leader knew who the name of the Lord was. And he would say, Lord, if you would just give me victory, and I have no idea how that's even possible, but if you would hand it to my hand, I will give freedom to these men who are willing to die for it. And the Lord heard the prayers of this man, George Washington. And on October the 7th, notice the numbers here, in the year of 1777, the tides would change at the Battle of Saratoga. Now, in the midst of all of this, there was actually a man named Gates, who it was accused that he was part of a cabal, and it was called a conspiracy at the time. But then it turned out later that he was part of a cabal, and Gates went away in shame. And I'm making no correlation. I just find the history of these events fascinating. And George Washington, that man who would go out there and he would pray, he did something unusual after he began taking victories, clear victories over the British. He did something unusual in all of world history, because there were many who said he could be King George at that point. He handed the power back, just as he said that he would. He handed the power back to we the people, something that had never existed before in the history of the entire world. Now let me read these parts to you again, because I think there are parts of this that you have not gotten to yet in your world history, but you're probably right at their doorstep. These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the keys of David. What he opens, no man can shut, and what he shuts, no man can open. Verse 8, I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door. I know that you have little strength left. Was he really writing this to an ancient church at that time? Or was this looking forward into the hours that you're sitting through right now as you watch this video? I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Even the least among us, the most rebellious, sitting on a street corner in a tent here in the United States, knows the name of Jesus and where to call if things really get rough. Verse 9. 9 can often be a heavy occult number. It's a 6 upside down, the gateway of the 9. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, there's that phrase again, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, they are liars. I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. These are very bold words. 10. That's the yod. That's a number of completion. Since you have kept my command. These almost sound like military words, don't they? To endure patiently. Do you feel like you've endured patiently? I will also keep you from the hour of trial. Hour of trial. What does that mean? Is that like the time of Jacob's trouble being referenced right here in the text? I will scoot you out of the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. An open doorway. Verse 11, I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. There's that corona or crown again. To the one who is victorious, that's in verse 12, that's a number of high authority. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Now the word crown and the scooting out of the way of the hour of trial or time of Jacob's trouble that is coming upon the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. And I have placed before thee an open door that no man can shut. Well, that kind of reminds me of, and don't forget, we are in the 6th church. In fact, there's the Volve on the screen behind me back there, where someone's coming after a corona or a crown with 6s all around. Kind of takes me to these Hebrew symbols. Here's my Aleph. I come all the way down, and right here I have my symbol of my shin, my consuming fire, my teeth, which looks a lot like a crown. Don't let them take your crown. And we come right through that cross because we have not denied his name, which becomes in its modern form, of course, that open doorway within which dwells the Spirit of God himself, like a little yod. That's the yod in its ancient form behind me. I didn't pick that. Dangling through the gateway between heaven and earth. as if somebody is reaching right through to give you a hand in that sixth church. In short, I do not believe that God is in any way done with America, and that he heard the prayers of the founding fathers, many of them in this place, despite all of their imperfections. This man, George Washington, his prayers will bring tears to your eyes for the men that were out there on that field who would finally take victories. Just like George Washington displayed here crossing the Delaware, and he had a lot go wrong that night. This was a stealth mission that was pulled on December 25th of 1776. But he took a victory that night. And through some maybe dark hours, that the light in this place, in this land, might shine brightly as it has before again. In fact, I'm praying that it shines more brightly than it ever has in its entire history, is my prayer. Okay, this is a spot that John really likes, and he's up ahead of us.
What makes a natural moat around that area? There's only one way in and one way out, and it was a Native American settlement where there were hundreds and hundreds of people, and the mound here is one of the biggest mounds in Tennessee.
Over at God in a Nutshell, we're going to begin exploring some different sites that are, in this case, on the screen behind me, you're looking at the backwoods just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, on the way up to some Indian mounds, which are all over out there in Tennessee. Here's the walking trail, and here's Julie, and she's pointing at a copperhead snake.
There it is, right there. You see in between there? It's looking at us now. Do you see his little face?
So right there on the screen that you see slithering by, that's actually a copperhead that was right there in the brush, close enough where it could strike your feet on the walking path on the way up to look out where the Indian mounds are. We're going to be exploring quite a few things that I've been putting together that are going up one at a time over there on the God in a Nutshell website. Some of them are just fun things. In that particular case, which you're looking at, we're going to look at some Indian mounds, some of the actual roots of this nation, United States. I believe there are blessings that are on this land that come even from the Native Americans, the American Indians. I'd like to come now to our final church, Laodicea. This is the Richie Rich church. The worldly church is what it is. You think you are rich, but you are poor, blind, and naked. I am going to spew you out of my mouth. That sounds like rejection to me. This is the only one of the churches, the 7 churches, where Jesus is actually outside of the church. It says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Now, a lot of pastors will couch that and present that as if that's a good thing. Jesus is at the door knocking, but it's the only one where he's actually outside of the church. "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear me, I will come to him and sup with him." It is my very strong opinion that in Revelation 2 and 3, these sections in the interpretation that I'm giving you here, that you have not fulfilled, you have not completed all of the elements that exist within the Church of Philadelphia. In fact, more than that, the most exciting parts, the victorious parts, both light and dark, that exist within that Church of Philadelphia, it is my opinion that they've not been completed yet. And if that be the case, then that means you are living in the most exciting times of all of human history. And just like George Washington crossing that Delaware, you have the same light and dark at that time. Look, the lion is back there. You have the same light and dark at that time, right then, as you do right now today, do you not? And let me ask you another thing. Even the secret-y things, even the dark things, don't even those have a role to play in the end?
So, and this is a Freemasonic temple in downtown Nashville, right on Broadway. And you see Grand Lodge of the Masons. Look at the scope of this building right here in downtown as you come into Music City.
These are just a few clips of things that I'm sort of in the progress of putting together, but I think they're interesting things, and I'll do them carefully, trust me.
And it's by, well, we're gonna go up the stairs. This is right next to where the Bell Witch Cave, the haunted Bell Witch Cave, with all this supernatural activity or demonic activity has gone on. And this is an abandoned Freemasonic lodge. What is this book down here?
Over at godinanutshell.com, not only do we have our entire Genesis series, that's like 7 or 8 films at this point, and these are all full-length documentaries, and they're pretty good ones, guys. You go through the pre-flood world. The Tower of Babel is one of my personal favorites. There's 7 or 8 of these, and they're all available for streaming. And here on the screen behind me, The Last Prophecy, this deals with a lot of the prophetic things that Kim Clement had said, and this is the best presentation of them that I believe I've ever done. There's a very extended version of it, very extended. There's a lot of things in there that you just simply couldn't play, and you probably know what I'm talking about.
The wall, there's a wall being built that will not be completed for a takeover. Already a plan.
But even as an atheist, in fact, I know that you do, because there's things that Kim said that are just simply would be too much. Even if a person were an atheist, one of the things I start the film by doing is going through things that Kim said that he could not have known them in advance. And you've got a lot of heavy hours that are upon you, but it ends well. And I think it's a very comforting film in many ways, but it's also a film that is going to shake you a little, because I use those prophecies so that I will know the things that are coming next. I trust them that strongly, but all I can do is just lay them in your hands. The Last Prophecy, it's one of my favorite presentations that I have done on those prophecies and on Donald Trump.
And right now I'm walking you through the ancient pillars of the Karnak Temple in ancient Egypt. These pillars right here, this would be one of the temples called the Temple of a Million Years.
And speaking of prophecy and prophetic words, this film behind me is called The Rise of Joseph. And in truth, it's a throwback to some things even that Kim Clement had said about a Joseph period that was coming. Let me ask you this. Do you feel like there's famine coming in this United States? This film took me roughly 8 months to make, and I won't disappear for that length of time again, but I felt that it was for a variety of reasons. I believe you're in Exodus time periods of history.
God says, out of Egypt did I call my son. It was out of Egypt, this land where I stand, where he called his people, the place of the Pharaohs. And I'll give you one more hint of the Pharaoh of the Exodus was. As I make this corner right here, I'm going to point you to a real big clue standing right behind me.
But I wanted to go through from the very start of Egypt and some of the symbols, even of the secret-y little clubhouses or pyramids, are they not? I wanted to go through the history of Egypt, beginning with one of the characters that's lifted up a lot in those very same clubhouses, Osiris, the god Osiris. He's both in your Genesis text, well, he can be found in your Genesis text, as well as in the book of Yasher, and other documents are going to tell you exactly how Egypt started. In fact, you never would have heard of Egypt without Joseph. That's a fact, Jack. And I'm going to make that case to you in this film. This is one of the best films that we've ever made at God in a Nutshell. I believe that. And I'd ask you to do a review of it when you finish the film. You're going to go through the death of Nimrod. Speaking of the Freemasons, he would be the mother or the birth of all of the Freemasons. Oh, thank you. And this question here, how did the Hebrews end up with slaves? And this question here, how did the Hebrews end up as slaves? That's an important question for these hours you're in. Prophecy is not just prediction and fulfillment, it's also pattern. I'll give you a hint on that one, that it was by the financial systems of that time that they would end up as slaves. Who were the pharaohs of the Exodus? All of these questions are answered in this film, but at the heart of all of it, I wanted to prove, scratch that, overwhelmingly prove, that the biblical Exodus and Joseph were real. My name is Trey Smith, and I'd like to thank you for watching this film, and I'd like to invite you to come over to godinanutshell.com, where I believe very, very strongly that we have many more things that you'll be very impressed with. In fact, things that are probably far more impressive than the film you just watched. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. God bless every last one of you and your families on the other side of the screen.